Hi, everybody. It's Alby Oxenrider with our friend and partner from DKPittsburghSports.com, Dan Kovacevic. How you doing?
Alby.
Great to see you.
It's good to be here.
Here we are.
It really is, actually. Sometimes people just say that. It actually really is. It's fun to be around football in May.
It really is. And the Steelers finished their second week of OTAs. And a lot of people ask me, what do they accomplish at OTAs? Now, this is their second week. They'll have one more week of OTAs. They'll have a mini camp, and then there will be a little bit of a break before training camp. But there is a lot of good stuff going on here early. Team building, for one. Some of the older players with the newer players, getting to know them a little bit. Chemistry, and in the case of the quarterback and the receivers, timing and rhythm, and that's so important in getting to know. What's your take on these first couple weeks of OTAs?
I was just speaking with Mason Rudolph, as a matter of fact, so it's funny that you mentioned the quarterback receiver thing. He was saying that through the offseason, he will dive into the playbook. He'll get in there and he'll try to envision the X's and O's and the slash marks and everything playing out. He'll also have people work with him privately, the same way Ben Roethlisberger and other quarterbacks do, running routes, doing things out of the playbook. But there's a huge difference between that and having even a simulated defense in shorts, no tackle.
Right.
They're making interceptions here. They're making plays on the football. They're making reads off of you, off of things that you're doing. You're locking onto a receiver. They're going to bust you on it. That's where the real value is. I think it's for the quarterbacks and for the wide receivers, also obviously for tight ends and running backs coming out of the backfield. More for them than anything, because they can get that football feel going into the other events that you mentioned when it starts getting a little bit more serious and physical.
Mason Rudolph told us and some other reporters that he is locked in on grabbing that number 2 spot. We talked to Josh Dobbs yesterday, and Josh Dobbs said he, on the other hand, thinks it's too early to be thinking about that. There are things to accomplish here, from reps to high level of execution on the plays that they're running, to the things that I mentioned earlier, chemistry and timing with receivers. Josh Dobbs says he's not worried about that just yet. Mason Rudolph says he's locked in on trying to grab that spot. How do you see that playing out? I mean, clearly Dobbs was the backup last year. Ben is the solid number 1, unquestioned number 1, but there's going to be a little bit of elbowing for that second spot.
I think that's healthy, first of all, and that's obvious. Rudolph has that competitive fire about him. You hear that, as hokey as this will sound, even in his cadence in the huddle. It's something that we talked about last summer when he was out there in preseason, and he did take charge. He has an authoritative presence about him. He's not going to stay in the back seat. Nor, do I think anyway, should he. Josh Dobbs got a handful of snaps in an Oakland game that did not go well.
Right.
He made the one great pass that everybody remembers in the Baltimore game.
Right.
But other than that, what did he do to assert himself as the number 2 quarterback? We're not talking about Charlie Batch here.
Right.
So I think there should be a battle there. Whether either of them, I don't care about how they verbalize it to us. There should be an actual battle between the two. That's going to end up being a really big deal, Alby. You know that when we get to Latrobe and into the preseason, because those are going to be the guys taking the snaps. Those are going to be the guys playing 3.5 quarters of the preseason games, not Ben, and they're going to be the ones we're talking about.
No quarterback controversy here, but maybe a backup quarterback battle that will be intriguing as we head up to St. Vincent.
Yes. And important. That's the part that you can't. I mean, the Oakland game was a fiasco on 100 levels. Not least of which was that they brought in a backup quarterback who couldn't get it done. And that's important, because if they win that Oakland game, they were in the playoffs. It's a very different setting for this team, even in the offseason, had they gotten just a couple of completions from their backup quarterback.
A lot of veterans not here for the 6th OTA, the Thursday OTA. Let's face it, these are in many cases, other than the timing between the quarterback and the receivers and the team building, but this is primarily for the young players to get out and get reps and get up to speed with what's going on in the NFL. How do you see running back and some of the things that we've talked about leading up from the draft up to this point? Benny Snell being one, and Jalen Samuels is trying to work his way into that mix, as well as some of the other running backs. How do you see that?
Well, the best part about it, to my eyes so far, and actually to my ears as well, because I liked, for example, what James Conner told us earlier this week about he believes in the running back by committee, if you will. That wasn't exactly the terminology that he used, but he believes in using multiple running backs. He did that even when he was starring at Pitt. He going in and out, being able to know that you can exert yourself over a handful of snaps or a drive, or when you get to the goal line, that there might be someone else who comes in with a completely fresh set of wheels. I think that with James embracing that, and then the great attitudes that have been shown by Jalen Samuels all through last year, and obviously Benny Snell's like the happiest guy in the world, these guys can be a good running back combo. The only part of this that's made me cringe to date, and this is on the outside, not on the inside, has been that Snell, everyone's getting so fired up about Snell that they're forgetting that Jalen Samuels was an impact player for this team. Let's remember the New England game, and if you don't, pop it back in.
Right.
Okay, that was supposed to be the one thing that was going to kill the Steelers against the Patriots was, Belichick's never going to let this nobody who never ran the ball into college even to run. And he did. He was a hard slashing runner in that game. Offensive linemen were telling me that he reminded them, in terms of style, D'Angelo Williams, where he would see the hole and he would just diagonally just bite through it. That's great because you have different types of running backs as well. I'm telling you, we mentioned the quarterbacks. By the time we get to preseason games, this is going to be, I think, the most exciting, not necessarily the most controversial, but the most exciting aspect of Steelers football when you get to it.
No question. And receiver, it goes without saying that receiver is going to be something very, very juicy as we head to training camp. And let's face it, it's very clear what's going on here. Juju Smith-Schuster wants to be that guy, and there's a long list of, James Washington is looking to step it up this year after a challenge last year from Ben Roethlisberger in his growing process, and he had some teaching moments last year, I think, on the field that he will learn from, and certainly shined at times. I think Dante Moncrief gives this team a little bit of a boost in that regard, and Switzer and some of the other receivers that are here. How do you see? And I think it's important to say that Juju Smith-Schuster said, "I would rather have 5 catches for 30 yards than a number of touchdowns. And I'd rather win than have a number of touchdowns and lose." Maybe they'll be spreading it out a little bit more with Juju being the front guy. What do you think?
Well, I actually asked that direct question to Ben, and his response was, that his history, and he's right, his history is that he does spread it out. However, we have seen, and we did see in 2018, where there were times, whether it was because of the drama or the thought that maybe if AB doesn't get the ball, 7 times in this half, he's going to go beat up a water cooler, that Ben wanted to make sure that he got the ball into AB X number of times. He's not going to have that pressure. It's to some extent with Juju, but otherwise, I don't think overall. When you look at the Steelers receivers, the scenario that interests me the most is the ability for someone to spread the field, because 68% of Juju's catches last year came from in the slot area, came from fairly close to the line of scrimmage. Now, Juju's also had, as we've seen, the home runs, but even some of his home run plays originate very close.
Right, too close to the line of scrimmage, right.
Sure. So how do you spread the field and have the other team take you seriously enough to drop a safety back into double coverage with somebody running a deep route instead of just saying, you know what, that's James Washington and he hasn't caught anything and I'm not going to worry about him, and then they stay ganging up on Juju. Dante Moncrief has to be that guy, but in order to be that guy, he has to make catches that he hasn't always consistently made in the past. James Washington, you mentioned, he had the teaching lesson from Ben. A lot of that is just James Washington needing to go up and get the ball. Those combat catches that Mike Tomlin was talking about, remember last summer, that we didn't see in the once he got to regular season games. But the other guy, this is with all due respect to Ryan Switzer, who's shown himself to have earned Ben's trust as a possession guy in tight areas, is Deontay Johnson. If he is capable of about 3/4 of what the Steelers are expecting from him, what I'm hearing, in his rookie season, then that's going to make a different kind of impact on Juju in the short areas, because now they're going to be running similar routes in similar ranges, but if they're both getting open and they're both making plays, there's only so much double teaming you can do on Juju in a short range. And that's not saying nothing of Vance McDonald.
I was going to say, and that's a perfect transition as we wrap up our look at the offense, and there's some other things we can talk about at another time, including the offensive line. Tight ends, Vance McDonald is certainly a very inviting target, and he has shown us a whole lot. But there's some other, not only the X-Man, but how about Zach Gentry, who is still learning the position. He's relatively young as a tight end, came up as a quarterback, but he said some stuff after the practice today that was also very intriguing, and I think he's a big target. They lose Jesse James, and he has an opportunity to maybe fill that role.
He's enormous.
Yeah, yeah, he is.
This is a pretty big dude for a tight end. Actually, he's a pretty big dude for a human, and he's rough too. And I think that's the what's going to hold him back in the passing game. Jesse James was a very polished pass catcher when Jesse came out. Heck, not just when he came out of Penn State, when he came out of South Allegheny. Jesse was very much a pass catching guy. It was the other way around with Jesse, where they had to teach him, and he was be the first one to acknowledge this. They had to basically teach him how to block the Steelers' way. If you're here and you're a tight end in Pittsburgh, you got to be able to block like Heath Miller, not just catch like Heath Miller. And Jesse became better at that. He strengthened his game, not necessarily to any great extreme. What you're left with now, though, is a scenario, I think, where the Steelers are looking at Xavier Grimble as the default number 2. That's got me worried on one hand, because let's face it, we're all prisoners of the moment, okay? And we know what the moment was with X, and that was in Denver. Right. He shouldn't be defined by that moment any more than the now late Bill Buckner should have been defined by one error, or for that matter, in a positive sense, than Maz should have been defined by his home run. There's a lot more to the equation. But that said, I would not be surprised, Alby, if the Steelers don't continue shopping, looking around for possible additional tight end depth.
All right, so that's tight end, receiver, running back, quarterback. We'll talk about the offensive line at another time, as well as the defense and special teams. Those are stuff. Those are all areas of this team that we will be talking about until training camp.
There's time, my man. Yeah. There's time.
That's a good start as the Steelers wrap up their second week of OTAs. They'll be back at it after the weekend, back here at the Southside facility on Tuesday. Thank you, Dan.
All right, Alby.
Always a pleasure. For Dan Kovacevic, I'm Alby Oxenrider. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.